Planting trees to save the planet sounds like a good idea. Trees are about half carbon, which means they're really effective carbon storage devices. So effective that simply by increasing the amount of forested area on Earth, we may be able to store about 1/4 of the carbon dioxide to be precise, needed to head off the worst aspects of climate change. That's why we Earthlings are planting about 2 billion of these carbon-storing machines every year. Except there's a problem. If we aren't careful about how we plant trees, we run the risk of actually releasing carbon instead of storing it away. Hi, I'm Kate, and this is Minute Earth. Okay, so issue number 1. Where should we put all these carbon-storing machines? This big open space seems perfect. But there's actually already an ecosystem here storing tons of carbon. Literally tons. An acre of native grassland can store as much as 80 tons of carbon, around 2/3 of the carbon an acre of forest can store. Planting trees here, especially non-native ones, will kill the grasses, disrupt the ecosystem, and unstore basically all its stored up carbon. The same thing happens when we plant trees in other places, like moors and peat bogs, that may seem empty, but are actually established ecosystems storing lots of carbon. When we disrupt those areas to plant new trees, a lot of that carbon gets released. And sure, the trees we plant, if they actually grow, will eventually suck that released CO2, and maybe a bit more, back out of the air. But that will take decades, time that we don't really have. It's way better to leave existing ecosystems like grasslands and peat bogs intact and focus our efforts in places where forests used to exist, before we cut them for timber or farmland. And that is where lots of planting projects happen. But there, we make a different mistake when it comes to removing carbon. We plant trees instead of forests. Over half of all international planting projects involve filling deforested areas with row after row of 1 or 2 types of fast-growing, non-native trees. These projects, which are basically tree farms, do pull carbon from the air. But since the trees are usually grown to be harvested, the carbon they store may not be stored for long. Plus, since these plantings are far less diverse than natural forests, not only do they usually store less carbon in the first place, but they're also much more prone to disease and drought, which can severely limit their carbon storing abilities. If we really want to store as much carbon as we can, and keep it stored, we need to plant forests, not just trees. Of course, protecting our planet from environmental damage isn't only about storing carbon. It's also about conserving native plants and animals, keeping the water clean, and ensuring everyone has the food and medicine they need. But it turns out that planting trees in a way that maximizes how well ecosystems function, rather than maximizing the sheer number of trees, accomplishes all these goals. In other words, when it comes to planting for our planet, we need to make sure we see the forests for the trees. Special thanks to the Society for Ecological Restoration and its global partners for their support during this production, and to the Convention on Biological Diversity, which is part of the United Nations Environment Program. Thanks to Kingsley Dixon and the team at Curtin University and the Centers for Mining Restoration and Healing Country for supporting and sponsoring this video.